I'm Joshua Adams, and this is the Industry Insights Podcast, where I am joined in the Rock Paper Simple studio by community leaders as we dive into industry topics and perspectives. Well, thanks for joining us today. I have Nick Kugler, President, Founder, CEO, Head Honcho of Above Group. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So we're going to have some fun today. I'm excited about it. We're going to talk about buffalo culture. And this means this has kind of a high level meaning. Something that's been a lot of fun. My team's done some work with you guys in the past on some videos, and the topic came up. And then we connected with a new client shortly thereafter, and they're like, "Hey, you guys know about buffalo culture?" And then I came in and I have my C12 buffalo culture socks on, and the team's like, "Okay, what gives with the buffalo? What's going on?"
Mm-hmm.
So this will be a fun one, I think, for the team as well to kind of hear. But when we talk about what is buffalo culture, what does that mean to you?
Well, it kind of goes back to this whole story, like what's the buffalo all about? Well, and I'll say this now, if you ask my son, it's not really even a buffalo. It's an American bison, but hey, the buffalo thing kind of came back to, part of C12 group together, and we always talked about the buffalo, so that kind of stuck, and we carried that forward. And the concept of the American bison, like on the plains of Colorado, basically, and you have the Rocky Mountains to the west, and you have the plains to the east, and as the storms historically, roll over the Rockies, a buffalo looks at the storm and he does one thing. Well, a cow or a cattle on the range, they do another thing. They look at the storm and see it coming, and they hightail it to the east, and they're out of there, But what happens is the storm comes through and they're running away from the storm, and they actually stay longer in the storm. It's just this thing. They're just sitting in the clouds going the same way. They stay in the storm. Well, the American bison looks at the storm coming and they run straight towards it. So the clouds are coming, moving east, they run west, and they get in the storm faster. They're in the storm faster, but they're in the storm for a whole lot shorter duration.
Makes sense.
So for us, buffalo culture, it's actually one of our core values, buffalo. And buffalo is like that, the premise of looking at your problems or looking at a challenge and running straight at it, looking for a solution as fast as you can, rather than, dwelling on the issue and kind of getting stuck and staying in that storm longer than you have to. So that's our concept of buffalo.
Well, and I love that. And I think we naturally, people don't like conflict, generally, most people. And I think generally there's this idea of, I don't want to deal with that. That can be a later problem. I'll deal with it tomorrow. I'll deal with it. And I think buffalo culture says, no, deal with it now. Deal with it immediately. Because you're going to be in it faster, but you'll be through it faster. And I think that's maybe the basics of buffalo culture is get to the problem or get to the issue or get to the challenge faster, but as an exchange, as a reward for dealing with it faster, you'll get through it faster. And I found that to be true in the majority of situations. I look back at some things maybe where I didn't apply buffalo, and I go, ooh, I really should have. I should have addressed that faster, dealt with it faster. So I love that it's a core value for you. And so that's one of the reasons that I wanted to bring that up today. And so tell me a little bit more about what that looks like in the culture of a business, right? So we hear it, we've discussed it more as a culture of a leader and being a good leader, leading your people well, but you've taken a step further versus just applying it to you as a leader. You've applied it to your team and say, hey, this is one of the core qualifications that our people adhere to is buffalo, this idea. So tell me what that looks like in a business culture like that.
Yeah. So I think it starts in the hiring process, telling people that that's one of our values. We're not going to skirt issues. We're going to go right at them. And we kind of look for that, at least acknowledgement in others, that we're looking as a potential candidate, that they're willing to or identify or value that as being important to the company. So that's kind of step one is you can't really force the concept or the thinking of buffalo on people that don't already have it there already. And then we're just fostering and growing that as part of an embracement of our whole culture. So, that's kind of how you apply it. It's our core value. So it's present. I think there's so many different ways that we represent it, in terms of like, well, for example, like you can see,
Nice.
it's like all our
Representing.
core values, but the buffalo is kind of the centerpiece, that really embodies everything together. And so, we actually just started this little program as part of, not just the buffalo, but we have this core value program that we have, where we call it our values program, where you actually, our team members nominate each other for recognizing core value, demonstration throughout the month. And then at the end of the month, we draw a name, that person gets a prize. And so we've been doing that for I think, 4 years or so now. And at the end of the year, all those folks that were nominated and also that nominate others, they get like a grand prize at the end of the year. Well, we just started this new thing where if you've seen a stuffed buffalo, kind of we have this new concept of specifically for people, if they're demonstrating that they are being a buffalo, then we give them a stuffed buffalo, to be part of that. So
Nice.
and so that's kind of how we reward it and encourage it and represent it. We have pictures of buffalo on our walls in our office, and so on and so forth. But there's a lot of opportunity to do that. But it starts with, implanting that when we're evaluating candidates, and then going from there. And then we reinforce, like I said, all of our core values on a regular basis. And then that becomes like this foundation of conversation. So you approach these problems, or when a problem comes up, team members already know that you're not going to hide from it. You're not going to skirt it. We're just going to both jump in and we're going to discuss this. It's like some people that don't understand it see it as button heads, but it's really not that. It's really engaging in the problem.
Well, it's healthy conflict, right? And I think that's something that's missing in a lot of leadership teams, a lot of teams in general, and it's something we've really embraced over the last year or two, is what does healthy conflict look like in a business, in an agency, between colleagues, right, on a leadership team. And there's certainly conflict that is unhealthy, doesn't get you anywhere. You're stuck. You're not moving where you need to move. But then there's that conflict that needs to happen, that's healthy, that makes us sharpens iron, right? Iron sharpeneth iron, right? I went old King James on that one there, But there's that idea that we can make each other better when we push a little bit, right? There's that idea, and something, like I said, we've been really embracing. I think it's part of this Buffalo culture concept, to stop putting things off, have the healthy dialogue, have that conversation you're dreading, that you really don't want to have, that's keeping you up. Why not only have one sleepless night instead of 3 or 4 or 10 while you're dwelling on this subject that hasn't been addressed?
Yeah, there's I had a specific thing about that just recently. It's my birthday, so I took the day off, but I got a call from one of my team members, or actually it wasn't a call, it was a text, and it was like, "Hey, what are you doing today?" And I was, I know this probably isn't good, because I don't get those kind of questions,
right,
unless I know it's a problem. So they texted me that, and I said, "Well, it's actually my birthday today. I got the day off," and so that was their response. "Okay, never mind. Like, get with me next week." I was like, "Nope." Because Buffalo says, like, there's something there, so you got to deal with it right now, and it's a good thing.
Yeah.
So then, we quickly identified the issue and had a resolution in that conversation, and then I got to enjoy the rest of my birthday. So that's
otherwise,
that's the way it is.
Otherwise, you'd have been stressed out for the whole day.
Yep.
You're thinking about, and I know how it is with me. I'm thinking about, okay, what is the issue? I'm making up all kinds of issues.
Right.
Yep. and it's probably what I made up is probably worse than what's actually going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's an element actually that's really healthy for us to deal with this. Go deal with it. Challenge, and it's different than just not being a procrastinator, right? Because procrastination is it's similar, but I think there's something different here, because there's tends to be with good Buffalo culture almost a conflict element of it, or a putting off of something that really should be urgent, but we're not making it urgent. So I think there's something a little deeper there even.
Yeah, because I think that's it really it honors God as well, because God wants to see us to not put those things off, because it really is it's omitting, or it's omission of what you need to be doing. That whether it's something I guess that's another thought of like something that you have to do that you're not doing. But in this case, something that needs to be dealt with that you don't deal with is the same kind of philosophy.
We have a responsibility, right? There's a responsibility to be good stewards, to be a good leader, to fulfill what we're supposed to be doing, we're called to do.
Yeah, I think a good example of that is our performance improvement process, our PIP, and it's kind of funny because I don't even think all of our team members even know that we do it. Is the funny thing about it, because the heart behind it isn't that you're scolding somebody, and it's really kind of like other companies when you talk about like being on a PIP or performance improvement plan, like it's kind of like, ugh, that's a bad thing.
It's an HR thing. It's a bad thing,
But for us, the heart behind it is like is kind of just in alignment with Buffalo, because you're actually saying like, hey, there needs to be communication here and it needs to be head on, and there's an issue and it needs to be dealt with now. And our team members that have gone through this, we have a pretty high percentage that go on performance improvement plans that come back out of it, and they're way better for themselves. They're happier with their role and everything that they're doing as a result of that. It does just, we don't bat 1,000 with that, but it's that's usually the reaction, and we see a huge improvement of just all around 360-degree life for a team member and how they fit in. And if you don't do that, then all those problems fester and everything, and so it just gives us an opportunity to really hit those things head on and not avoid the issues. And it really does come from that heart of, hey, we really want to help. Like that's the thing, is like helping is active. It's not passive. So if you actually want to do something to help people, you actually got to do something. Well, sometimes action isn't necessarily like received well or comfortable, but when you're on the other side of it, you see that action was necessary, needed to happen, and then people appreciate that.
Agreed. I actually think that a symptom of not having this type of approach can be fear in the workplace, right? Because you're worried about this thing. You might not have been addressed yet. It's bothering somebody, whether it be a direct report or somebody that reports to you, and it becomes this fear situation. And I see it on both sides. I see it with leaders where there's this fear of, if I say this or I push too hard, am I going to push away a good employee or a good team member? Am I going to set something off here? But then there's fear on the flip side of, am I going to get in trouble if I bring this up? Maybe they haven't noticed yet. And it can create this sense of disconnect that actually can be pretty toxic in a workspace, not even intentionally. And so I see there, and as we've kind of been encouraging healthier conflict even within our own team, dealing with it faster removes that fear, right? I've had a personal motto forever, for as long as I can remember, ever forward, right? And I think we've talked about it in the past, but it's just this idea of the answer is forward. Let's go forward through this. We might need to make a course correct. We might need to do something along those lines, but tends to be a step forward, right? You look at in scripture, the Israelites were fleeing Egypt, right? And they came up, and what did they have? They had mountains on either side. They had a sea, and they had the Egyptian army behind them. And it was like, it looked hopeless, right? And it looked impossible. And Moses, and this is the paraphrased version, but Moses goes, "Okay, Lord, what the heck? Why'd you bring me here, right? What do I do, right?" And I always like to think that God was kind of like, "What do you mean? What do you do? Go forward." And again, that's the paraphrased Joshua version, but I've always kind of almost gone, "What do you mean? I told you to go this way, go forward." And they went forward, and what happened is the sea parted, and they go through. And so there's that idea, that story to me tends to resonate in terms of, what's the answer? Well, forward. Okay, let's figure out. Sometimes you got to take the step, right? And I think that forward is very much the opposite of fear, right? And I think that's the situation here too. This Buffalo culture is very much the opposite of the fear culture.
Yeah, it's embracing that, moving forward. I like that. You can say no other options, but right in front of you, right forward, right. Move forward. Yeah, I like that.
So we talked a bit about how we apply Buffalo culture internally with your staff and your team, but there's also other areas like with your clients, and I think that's maybe not as obvious. How do you apply this way of thinking, this Buffalo culture side of things, to how you interact with clients?
Yeah, so I think one of the major things is transparency. You kind of like, part of Buffalo, I think, inherently is you got to be honest. And so, part of honesty is being genuine, and that all results in, you have to be transparent. So I think that's step number one. And we demand the same thing from our clients, because most of our clients are teaming partners as well. So they're very important. There's this win-win relationship that we like to develop with all of our clients. And so I think that we demand the same thing from them, the same kind of transparency, honesty, openness, and it really, that's the secret to making that win-win work. But that's really at the heart of, the Buffalo is at the heart of all that, because that mentality of, being open, and then you see the issues and then you address them head on and you say, hey, this thing right here, we got to talk about this like now. We don't really sit around and cower and strategize and how we're going to deal with it. No, we just talk about it, because that's what Buffalo does. It goes right to it, addresses the issue that's in the room. And, I know we're talking about buffaloes, it's kind of what happens is if you don't buffalo, then you get the buffalo in the room or the elephant in the room, if you will. But it's the same kind of idea.
Right.
And so we try not to have any of those in the room. Well, sometimes that results in a little uncomfortable conflict. And, unfortunately, if folks on the other side don't understand that Buffalo approach, then they might be a little bit thrown off. But if you kind of communicate that in the front end, like, look, this is how we are. This is how we operate. This is what we expect. Like, kind of lay it out for them, then they're a little more receptive to that kind of approach. And actually they end up appreciating that. And it's so refreshing because, I would say is somewhat unique, in terms of that's how you interact with your clientele. Because we do value them so much, but we in turn we expect the return. We expect to be valued.
Right. And I think without setting expectations, that could be taken wrong. Right. Mm-hmm. But if you say, hey, this is how we approach it, this is what we can expect, this is what we'd like to expect of you. And it's always easier to do that at the beginning of the relationship.
Yeah. And which results in this thing that, you can kind of develop stronger relationships, but you really have that thing where you're not the right fit for everybody. But the folks that you really do fit well, they get it, and those bonds are stronger. So that's really kind of our business model, and that's what we develop. So we're very careful with who we're doing work with, and what work we're doing, and so that all comes from that. But once again, back to that whole mentality of if a project's not a fit, we tell them like that's not for us, and we haven't always been great at that, but we've really learned to lean into that over the last several years, and it's really made a huge impact on our business.
Well, that makes sense. What do you have? An example you could share of interacting with a client where you've had to use that concept? Obviously, names and locations removed for the safety and the innocent. But what kind of example do you have to kind of share that?
Yeah. So maybe this isn't a client thing, but it's involved a client. And so in our business, we're an engineering firm. So we design building systems. Essentially, we work with architects and we put all the systems in the building and we make buildings work. So I say that because a little background of the story. So when we design systems, they don't always turn out right, whether it's our fault or not. We're not perfect and we make mistakes, but we will buffalo it if we do. And this is an example of how we do that. So we had a project, very small project. This is actually you see one of those food trucks at like a theme park, which is not at all the business that we do today, but this is like in the past. But we had an issue where the contractor made a mistake and didn't build the project the way that we had designed it. And so inevitably in our industry, what happens is you get a bunch of folks in a room or on a conference call, and they're just doing this and pointing fingers at whose fault it is before we even come up with a solution. And that's not the way we do it, because Buffalo says like, no, we go right at the problem. That includes like, even if you're the problem, you still have to go at the problem. So, going at the problem is step number one, but that's the fastest way to find a solution. So in this instance, that's kind of the way the conference call was going. And so we just say, time out, what it ends up being is we can add a piece of equipment to make this issue go away, but the piece of equipment's not in the job. And it ended up being, if you can see one of those small little mini split air conditioning systems that you have, basically the way they installed it, made the room was hot. So we have to add air conditioning. Well, the fastest way was to get one of these mini splits. So I told him right on a conference call, I said, well, the solution is here to add a mini split. I was like, we'll buy one and we'll put it in. It wasn't our fault. But instead, I knew I'd spend more time messing with this issue than this small little mini split would cost me.
Right.
So I actually called up a friend that I knew that I could get the equipment from. We bought the equipment. I put it in the back of my truck and I took it to the job site and then the contractor installed it. But without us stepping up to the plate and running into the storm right away, that problem could have ballooned massively. And so, that really is a great example of Buffalo at work, is just going right at the problem, straight towards a solution, and avoiding the problem like getting bigger and escalating.
And I think that's some of the magic of this is typically problems left alone don't go away, right? So typically problems left alone get worse most of the time. They might be forgotten for a little bit. They tend to come back bigger than they were originally. And I think that's some of the magic of this is, hey, we're going to have less work to do in the long run if we address the situation now. And in your case, had that gotten worse, it may have escalated to different individuals. You may have had bigger meetings, more meetings. It could have turned into something that would have snowballed very, very quickly. Instead, you're saying, hey, the value of the time that we're going to waste digging into this, I can solve right now. I can solve it right now. Here's a solution. Let's dive into this. And in this case, it wasn't even your fault.
Right. And honestly, that's not the case every time. Like I said, we're not perfect. We make mistakes, but we deal with the problems either way. Whether it's your fault or not, you still have to attack problems the same way. And I think most people don't do that because human nature says, like, if this is my fault, I'm going to go into defense mode and I'm going to kind of protect myself from the fallout. Well, our philosophy is you're going to have to pay now or pay later. And like you said, if you pay later, it's going to be more.
Right.
And so I've experienced the other side of avoiding problems too. And it usually always balloons into way more than you expected, even if it's just that matter of the peace that you can get from resolving it. And I think that's in accordance to what God says in his word, is that you have an issue, like, deal with it right now.
Don't go to sleep on your anger.
That's right. And many other things, and the same thing, if somebody comes after you with a problem, like, or you get sued, you're supposed to give them the shirt off your back, and deal with it now, or go to your neighbor before it takes you to court. Like those kind of things. I think Buffalo applies to all that and really embodies that. And so that whole concept is just God's wisdom. We're just calling it something else, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think an example, real simple example. We built a website for a client years ago. And I remember we were, poking around the website. I was showing another client the website. And I noticed something was wrong with it. I kind of clicked on the next page real quick and showed the client something else. Then afterwards, I pulled it back up and I went, I wonder if we did this. And this was 18 months after we had launched the website, and they had chosen not to host with us. So we weren't even hosting it. So typically at that point, we're not maintaining it. We're not really watching it. But I'm looking at the issue. I'm going, I think we did this. I think this was an error. I think we messed this up. And so I ended up reaching out to the client and saying, hey, I spotted this thing on the site. I think this was a build issue. I think we did this. It's going to take us 15 minutes to fix it. Would you mind sending us credentials to get back in? Because they had since migrated it and changed credentials. They were so over the moon that we had spotted this. We're willing to fix it. They sent it. We fixed it. No problem. But it was something really, really simple. But here's what could have happened. I could have spotted it and said, oh, I don't want to mess with that. Ignored it. And then maybe a year later or longer, they reach out and go, hey, what gives? Like, you said you built this the right way. It's broken. We found this. How long has our website been broken without us knowing it? There could have been other issues. Again, depending on how far they want to push it, they could have said they've had a product that long. They may have wanted the money back. They may have said this could have cost us business. And how much business did we lose? Depending on how far they want to push it. Instead, we were the hero because we came in and owned our issue versus it being the other way around. And so as simple as that is, it's a really simple example, but it was Buffalo in action. It was saying, oh, I see an issue here. Very easily could have said problem for another day. We said, we're going to fix it. We're going to deal with it. So I think those kinds of things help protect you. I think that's a good example of what you just said earlier about living peaceably, right? And dealing with your neighbor before it comes to a court action. That kind of thing. Now, granted, I don't think they were going to sue me over this, but it's a very, very small example of dealing with something before it could have become contentious.
Right.
So Nick, a lot of moving parts with Buffalo culture, but I think it's simpler than people make it out to be. In a few words, how would you summarize Buffalo culture?
I think it's just going straight at your problems, not avoiding them, not running away from them, not hiding, not overthinking them, just going straight at the problem, being honest and open and transparent as you approach that. And I think what it's not a bull in a china shop. It's it's simply going at the problems, and you can do that with grace and mercy as well. But just going right at it, solving the problem, and not avoiding it.
Love that. Love that. Well, Nick, thanks so much for spending some time with me today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Industry Insights. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe, comment, or even drop us a line over at rockpapersimple.com.